Westman. Christine Higdon is my guest today on Pre-authorized. Christine Higdon is the author of a book called Lulu's Island. And thank you for being here, Christine.
Thank you.
Tell us the story of Lulu's Island.
Okay, well, it's a little bit of a complicated story to tell, partly because it revolves around the disappearance of two women from a very small community in British Columbia. So you don't want to give away too much. But the two women who disappear are Bet Parsons, who's a mother of 5 children, and another woman named Alice McPhee. And Lulu Parsons, who is the 10-year-old daughter of Bet Parsons, comes home one afternoon to find a note on the kitchen table which says, it's from her mother to her father, and it says, "Wally, I will not live in a tar paper shack for the rest of my life. Love, Bet." So Lulu picks up this note and she pockets it, and she doesn't tell her father about it. And everyone comes home. Her mother does not come home. She doesn't appear for dinner, and everybody's starting to wonder what's happening. And there's a knock on the door, and it's a police officer who's come to tell them that another woman in the neighborhood has been reported missing. And at that point, all hell breaks loose. And Lulu, even at that point, doesn't tell anybody about this note that she received, that she found. And so she's keeping this little secret, or big secret, and the whole town is thrown into panic. People are all looking in the backyards for shallow graves, and nobody really knows, and we don't know whether Bet and Alice ran off, or they ran off together or separately, or whether they were actually murdered or ran into some kind of foul play. So Lulu sort of carries on through her life. We see Lulu when she tells her story from when she's 10 and then into her teenage years, and then when she's 50 years old. And she's also, the story rotates back and forth between two authors, two voices, and one of them is Lulu, told in the first person, and the other one is a woman named Doris Tenpenny, who's a farmer. She's 14 years older than Lulu, and she is, in a way, an observer. She has her own story in the novel, but she also observes what goes on with Lulu and her family and the whole community as a result of these disappearances. And so it's sort of this back and forth between the two of them.
Starting with Lulu, in her very young life, she sees a lot of trouble, the disappearance of her mother and other things that arise in her teenagehood, and then well into her adult life. In a way, I think you said she seeks out trouble. And yeah. I'm wondering what interested you in a character like that?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I think that partly the human condition is about suffering. And whether it's the human condition or whether there's just a lot of suffering in the world. And I think some people have an ability to be really resilient in the face of whatever suffering they have, and others don't, and Lulu doesn't. And I think partly because of her experience with the note, she has this idea that her mother ran off, which is got to be pretty awful for a child to imagine. Whether that's true or not, she doesn't actually know. But she's angry and she's confused, and so I think that sort of carries her through a lot of her actions in her life. She's, as a child, she's wild. She gets involved with a really nasty character in the novel who is actually the husband of the other woman who disappeared. His name is Aloysius McPhee. And he is not a good fellow, but she ends up spending a large part of her childhood and teenagehood with him, and gets into some pretty wild and inappropriate behavior. And then even as an adult, she's wearing this armband of detachment that she builds up as a result of what happened with her mother. But I think that people are, that whole resiliency thing and the whole thing about loss, I think loss is universal. We all lose somebody or something in our lives. And I think I wanted to explore that.
Doris, the second narrator of your story, is mute. And I'm really interested in why you gave her that trait and how you felt it helped her as a character and helped her tell the story.
Doris's muteness is something that allows the other people in the novel, or makes the other people in the novel, slow down. They have to slow down to speak to her because she speaks only by writing. So she communicates. She's an incredibly powerful character. Very stubborn, very opinionated, not particularly interested in human beings. Her connection is really more with the animals and the earth and her chickens and whatever. And I think I felt like her voice was a counterpoint to Lulu's. So Lulu is written in the first person, and Lulu, as we know, the stories we tell about ourselves aren't necessarily true or well thought through, or connecting with the reality of what's happening for you. It's all your opinion and whatever. And Doris is in a little bit. She's the truth teller and she's the observer. So she gets to observe this community and Lulu, and she watches this relationship develop between Lulu and this nefarious Aloysius McPhee. And she is certain that Aloysius murdered both Bet and his wife Alice. And so she's had a nasty experience with him as well. So she really despises him and is very cautious about this. But she gets to comment, and she's written in the third person, so she gets to comment, and that isn't necessarily in a non-subjective voice either. You get to have.
It's a close third person.
Yes, it is. It's very close. And so she gets to observe and tell us also what's going on from a different perspective. So, and I think the other thing about her being mute was that I thought about. There's actually a fair amount of feminist discourse about women who are mute in film and literature, which I have yet to really dig into, but I'd like to. And but one of the things I thought about her being mute was some things happened to her and to Lulu that, despite the fact that she's mute, and even if she were to say it, women in general in society, even if they do speak it out loud, they're not heard, they're not listened to. And so it was interesting, that little dynamic in her life.
I want to talk more about your writing in general, apart from the book. Mm-hmm. And you told me that you started writing from the age of 4,
right.
Which is when people learn to write.
Yes.
This is from the point that you became literate, you started writing.
Yeah.
And so tell us about some of the stories you used to write.
Oh, gee.
In childhood.
Yeah, I
did.
did.
You remember
I wrote
some
a lot,
of them?
and I do remember some of them. They were very much in the fantasy world. I read a lot of fairy tales and fantasy, what I guess we'd call fantasy books when I was little. Things about, I remember one about having to put the seeds from the back of ferns in your shoes, and you would be invisible if you did this, or flying Cornish piskies, or there were a lot of that kind of books. And we went to the bookmobile and eventually to the library and got books. But so I had a very rich reading history, and I think I wrote that kind of thing as well. And then as I became a teenager, I became quite politicized, and I think I shocked quite a number of my high school teachers with things about class or education. My first attempt at a novel was when I was about 13, and I had gone to see Love Story. And I don't know if you remember Love Story, but
that is before my time.
Yes, yeah. I'm sure. It was a love story, and it had a theme, a quote from it, which was, "Love means never having to say your story," which I always thought was pretty strange. But so I wrote this story. I thought it would be my novel about a young couple who live in a shelter that they built out of driftwood logs on Long Beach on Vancouver Island. And I figured I had to have a line that was similar to the love story line. So I said, love means, no, I said, love is like a light bulb. You have to turn it on.
Hilary McMahon at Westwood Creative Artists is your agent. Tell us what it's been like for you to submit your work, first to agents and then to publishers.
I feel like I've won $1 billion. It's really lovely. And I had submitted it to one other agent, and I sent it in on a Sunday in the morning, and that afternoon I got an email from her saying, please send me the whole book, which of course I was over the moon. It was just fantastic. And she wrote me back about 3 weeks later and said that they'd all read it and that they thought it really had high potential, but that it didn't fit with her list at the moment. And so I don't think I could have had a more wonderful rejection.
There are good rejections.
Pretty lovely, yeah.
The bad ones are just silence.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
That just go on. But to get a response like that, where they've read it, they've cared about it, you can tell that they are behind you.
That's right. Yeah.
Maybe the timing's off or whatever.
And
but it is a good rejection.
Yeah, exactly. And she said, if you write something else, please let me see it.
Great.
So that was very positive. So, but a rejection is a rejection. So I did have a little while of sort of thinking, what happens if you keep sending it in and it keeps being rejected and whatever. So, but I eventually girded my loins and said, okay, go for it. And I sent it to Hilary. And again, she wrote me back the same day and said, please send me the book, I'd like to read it. And a few weeks later, she wrote me and said she loved it. And so that was very exciting. And I went in and met with her. She's an absolutely wonderful person. And we chatted about the book, and she asked me to cut 100 pages, which I did. And that was an interesting process too. A friend of mine said to me, think of it as pruning a rose bush. And if you prune that bush, it's beautiful, it's very pretty to start with already, but once you prune it, it's even more beautiful. And in the end, it was almost as though she had given me permission to edit my book. And so I went in and edited it, and the 100 pages came out very cleanly. I think there was one scene that I thought, I'd like to keep that, but I felt that it could go. And so that was great. And at that point, she sent it out to a number of publishers. And there have been, she's talked to me about the comments that a number of publishers editors have said, and they're all very positive. And so little nibbles, but no bite as of yet. So I'm just keeping my fingers and toes crossed that somebody loves it as much as Hilary does. So.
Christine Higdon, thank you so much for being here today. And best of luck with the book.
Thank you.
Everything I've learned I have forgotten. Everything I've forgotten, it's just like new.